I am 62, a retired forensic expert, and for 3 years I've watched my only son, Michael, slowly die inside. He believes his ex-wife betrayed him, and that the boy he raised and loves, my grandson, isn't his. The pain has been excruciating to witness, but the truth is far more damning. The villain in this tragedy is me, his father. 35 years ago, I engineered this entire disaster. I used my specialized knowledge and lab access not to protect my family, but to destroy it. I fabricated Michael's paternity test results. I created the foundational lie that 3 years ago shattered his marriage and stole his son. I watched him suffer, silent, convinced the truth that I, his trusted father, was the architect of his pain, was too catastrophic to reveal. Today, I must confess my role and unleash a dangerous truth, even if it means destroying myself to save him. If you appreciate true stories of deep betrayal, twisted revenge, and ultimate redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the shocking details of how I tried to save my family by lying, only to destroy it, and the elaborate scheme I used to put the pieces back together. It all started back in 1990. I was at the peak of my career. Michael was young and deeply in love with Sarah, who was pregnant. A malicious rumor planted a seed of doubt in Michael's mind, and he came to me, his professional expert, for a discreet paternity test. I told him I would handle it. This was my moment of ethical failure. I was obsessed with the appearance of control and family honor. My own marriage was unstable, and the thought of a public paternity scandal or a potential divorce was unbearable. I couldn't risk the embarrassment. So, I committed a professional crime. It was disgustingly easy to switch the lab samples and generate a false result, definitively stating that Michael was not the biological father. I rationalized it as damage control. Michael would stop doubting, accept the child immediately, and our reputation would be protected. I handed him the official-looking, yet utterly fabricated document. Michael accepted the truth, and, ironically, the doubt vanished. He poured his heart into raising that boy, my grandson, with a fierce, protective love. He never questioned it again. The lie worked, but every time I saw them together, the guilt was a corrosive acid on my soul, poisoning the next 35 years of my life. The truth of my fabrication, the fake DNA test, wasn't just a document. It was a ticking time bomb embedded in the foundation of Michael's life. He needed closure on the malicious rumors, and I, in my arrogance, decided closure meant an absolute negative result, regardless of reality. The joy Michael displayed after I presented the results was heartbreaking. He stopped worrying about lineage and started focusing on fatherhood. He named the boy Ethan, and he was a brilliant, funny, energetic kid, my grandson. For years, the lie served its purpose. Michael and Sarah built a life. Sarah, knowing Michael's deep insecurity over the original rumor, seemed to develop a subconscious power over him. She never directly referenced the paternity test, but she had an air of confidence, a quiet, almost smug certainty in arguments that Michael could never counter. He felt indebted to her for staying, for loving a child he believed wasn't biologically his, even though he'd been the one to ask for the test. This manufactured gratitude was Sarah's initial leverage, the invisible chain around Michael's neck. I saw it, but I couldn't intervene without confessing my crime. My own wife, Michael's mother, never knew the truth about the swap. She was overjoyed with Ethan. The silence surrounding my professional misconduct was deafening, yet strangely comfortable, like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. My relationship with Michael blossomed, strengthened by the shared, unspoken burden of this secret I had supposedly shielded him from. He saw me as his protector, the man who had professionally confirmed the truth so he could move on. It made the guilt a physical ache. But Sarah, Michael's wife, was not as selfless as she appeared. Over time, her hidden manipulative streak began to show. As their marriage became strained, as marriages often do under pressure, she grew bolder. She used that veiled certainty to control decisions, from finances to where they spent holidays. Michael, forever operating under the cloud of the original, false paternity result, would always back down. He felt, deep down, that he was lucky to have her, given the circumstances. The bomb finally went off during a vicious argument 3 years ago, when Michael challenged her about a large, unauthorized withdrawal from their joint account. The fight escalated, the air thick with years of resentment. Sarah snapped. Her control fractured, and she aimed straight for Michael's most vulnerable spot. Quote 1, she screamed, her face contorted. Quote 2, the words, so casually cruel, hit him like a physical blow. To Michael, it wasn't just an insult. It was the confirmation of the truth he had buried 30 years prior. The fabricated DNA result, the proof I had given him, instantly rushed back to the surface. He went pale, silent. He realized she had not only cheated, but had used my carefully constructed lie against him. In that moment, the entire structure of his reality collapsed. My lie had become her ultimate, devastating weapon. And I was miles away, oblivious, yet fundamentally responsible. For 32 years, the life Michael and Sarah built felt real, solid. They had the idyllic family pictures, the shared holidays, the proud parent moments at Ethan's school events. But it was all erected on a foundation of professional misconduct and fear. My fear. Michael was an exceptional father. He didn't just raise Ethan, he molded him, passing on his love for classic cars and dry humor. Ethan, in turn, mirrored Michael's best qualities. Their bond was the only pure, unadulterated success story in this whole mess. And knowing I had forged the lie that put that bond in constant peril was a daily psychological torment. Michael's devotion was partly fueled by the perverse guilt of having initially doubted Sarah, even though my false test confirmed his doubt. He overcompensated, determined to prove that a father's love was genetic, regardless of biology. Meanwhile, Sarah skillfully managed the narrative. Whenever Michael would push back on a decision, she didn't need to scream. She only needed to sigh, to give him that look that said, "I took you back, didn't I? I stayed and raised him." It was emotional blackmail, subtle and constant, using the phantom of the other man and the sacrifice she made. The eventual downfall was inevitable. It just needed the right catalyst. That catalyst was money, or rather, Sarah's increasing recklessness with their finances. Michael was meticulous. Sarah was a spender, and she hid her habits. That day, when Michael confronted her about the missing money, it wasn't just about the balance. It was about trust that had eroded over decades. When Sarah delivered that devastating line, quote 7, it wasn't just malice. It was an admission of guilt mixed with a perverse attempt at self-justification. Michael didn't argue. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't need to. In his mind, she had just confirmed the truth I had personally authenticated 32 years earlier. The carefully filed, official-looking document I had created instantly validated her cruel scream. I remember Michael calling me that night. His voice wasn't angry, it was hollow, completely empty. He didn't ask for advice. He simply stated, "She confirmed it, Dad. The rumors were true. It's done." He meant the marriage was over. He was a man drowning, clinging to the only solid fact he had, the negative test result. He never even considered a second test because, in his professional mind, My initial report was definitive. The divorce was brutal, fast, and one-sided. Sarah used the paternity revelation as the central pillar of her case, portraying Michael as the vindictive husband who, upon learning the truth, was abandoning his family. Since my fake test showed he had no biological claim, he had zero legal ground to fight for Ethan. He lost the house, he lost a massive chunk of his assets, and worst of all, he lost shared custody. The boy he had raised since birth, the boy who was truly his, was now relegated to weekend visits. My professional lie had finally reached its full, destructive potential. I stood by, the silent architect of his ruin, watching my son's life crumble into dust. The shame was suffocating, yet I couldn't speak, terrified of the colossal damage my confession would cause. The 3 years following the divorce were a living nightmare for Michael. He didn't just move out, he retreated into himself. The vibrant, capable man I knew was replaced by a shell. He was grieving 2 losses, the end of his marriage and the supposed loss of biological connection to his son, Ethan. The latter hurt him more profoundly. He felt like a fraud, a man who had been duped for decades, and the sting of Sarah's betrayal was sharpened by the proof I had provided years ago. I saw the physical toll it took. Michael stopped exercising, he lost weight, and his eyes carried a permanent look of haunted exhaustion. Our conversations became sparse and superficial. He'd talk about work, but never about Ethan, not really. Whenever he did see the boy, limited, supervised visits granted by the court because he lacked any legal standing as a biological father, he would come back shattered, the separation ripping him apart all over again. My guilt during this time was absolute. Every hollow phone call, every painful silence, was a direct consequence of my self-serving lie from the 90s. I was the one holding the antidote, yet I was paralyzed. I kept telling myself that revealing the truth now would be even worse. It would expose the colossal deception, destroy my reputation, potentially lead to legal issues for professional misconduct, and, worst of all, make Michael question every single aspect of his life, including his relationship with me, his own father. The fear of his hatred kept me silent. I tried to help in small ways, financially, emotionally, but he kept me at arm's length. He saw me as a sympathetic ear, a reminder of the official truth that had destroyed him. He never once blamed me for the test results. Why would he? I was the expert. I was his dad. My supposed objectivity was the most painful part of my self-imposed prison. I had used trust as a weapon. Ethan, now a young teenager, was also a victim. He was confused and hurt by his parents' sudden acrimonious split. Sarah, driven by resentment and greed, painted Michael as the abandoning parent. She was subtly poisoning the well, turning Ethan against his father, using the limited contact to her advantage. Michael saw the emotional distance growing, and it crushed him. He was fighting a legal battle he couldn't win, and an emotional battle that was slowly wearing him down to nothing. I knew I couldn't let this continue. Watching my son diminish, realizing that my need for family honor had condemned him to this agony, finally cracked my resolve. The fear of Michael's anger was now outweighed by the visceral pain of watching his light extinguish. I had to choose. Protect my secret and my reputation, or save my son and give him back his child. The decision, though agonizing, was becoming clear, but I needed a catalyst, a final, unforgivable action from Sarah to justify the seismic explosion of truth I was planning. That catalyst was just around the corner, ready to push me into action. I was desperate for a sign, any definitive external push that would legitimize the catastrophic confession I knew I had to make. Sarah provided it, perfectly timed and executed with her usual malicious grace. It was late one Tuesday when Michael called me, not with the typical hollow resignation, but with a cold fury I hadn't heard in years. He had received an email from Sarah's new lawyer, a lawyer, I immediately noted, who specialized not in family law, but in complex civil disputes and reputation management. The contents of the email were staggering. Sarah was threatening a new lawsuit. She claimed Michael had engaged in financial misconduct and emotional abuse during the later years of their marriage, specifically targeting the period before the divorce. This wasn't about child support. It was about outright financial extortion. She was demanding a six-figure settlement, threatening to release a fabricated dossier of claims to Michael's professional board and the local press if he didn't comply within 10 days. The goal was clear. Sarah was running low on funds, and she was exploiting the remaining fear Michael held. She knew he was a man obsessed with his professional integrity and reputation, just as I had been decades ago. The ultimate irony was that she was now threatening to use real professional destruction based on fake accusations, after having already caused real familial destruction based on my fake evidence. I felt a violent shift inside me. This wasn't just Sarah being cruel. This was Sarah escalating her manipulation into criminal territory. She was trying to finish the job that my lie had started. She was attempting to bleed Michael dry, ensuring he would never have the financial stability to even consider fighting for more time with Ethan, let alone fight for full custody. "I can't take this, Dad," Michael said, his voice shaking. "I'll lose my career if she goes public with this garbage. I'm considering just paying her off to make her disappear." That sentence snapped me out of my paralyzing fear. Paying her off meant acknowledging the validity of her baseless claims. It meant sacrificing his future to a clear extortion attempt. I realized that my continued silence wasn't protecting my reputation. It was enabling Sarah's destructive behavior and guaranteeing Michael's complete ruin. My secret was no longer a personal stain. It was an active threat to my son's existence. "Michael, do nothing," I said, my voice firm for the first time in years. "Don't respond to the lawyer. Don't sign anything. I want you to give me 3 days. I have access to certain, let's call them historical documents, that might just stop her dead in her tracks." The ambiguity in my voice was deliberate. I was giving him a glimmer of hope without exposing the full, terrifying scope of my own involvement. The time for whispering was over. Sarah's greed had given me the mandate I needed. I didn't care about my professional reputation anymore. I cared about the shell of the man my son had become. It was time to deploy the truth bomb, carefully and ruthlessly. My revenge would be multifaceted. It would save Michael, obliterate Sarah's leverage, and finally, after 35 years, grant me a sliver of redemption. The moment Michael hung up, the retired forensic expert in me immediately took over. The guilt was still a searing pain, but it was now channeled into cold, surgical precision. Sarah's blackmail attempt was the perfect pretext for my ultimate confession and act of redress. My plan wasn't just to prove Michael was Ethan's father. It was to dismantle Sarah's credibility so thoroughly that she would lose all leverage, both financial and custodial. First, I needed irrefutable evidence of my original sin. When I falsified the results 35 years ago, I didn't destroy the true test. A scientist, even a corrupted one, often keeps their data. Deep in my archived professional records, secured in a heavy safe I hadn't opened since retirement, were the original, untampered tissue samples and the true, positive lab report confirming Michael as Ethan's biological father. Retrieving them felt like uncovering a historical artifact, a secret weapon against the life I had manufactured. But the real threat wasn't just the lie itself, but Sarah's belief in it. She was operating under the assumption that the fake test I gave Michael was the final, devastating truth, and that Michael's lack of biological connection was her eternal trump card. She didn't know the truth was positive. She only knew what I had confirmed decades ago was negative. My revenge needed to show the court, and Michael, not only the true result, but also the deliberate act of forgery. I had to admit the crime to annul the lie. I spent the next 2 days meticulously preparing. I accessed my old lab notes, detailing the exact protocol I had used to swap the control samples to generate the negative reading. I compiled a detailed affidavit outlining my professional misconduct, the methodology of the deception, and the motives, protecting family honor and preventing scandal. This affidavit was a suicide note to my career, guaranteeing scrutiny and possible legal trouble, but I accepted the cost. It was the only way to officially invalidate the fake results Sarah relied on. Next, I arranged a final, crucial meeting. I knew I couldn't just drop this bomb over the phone. I needed Sarah there, confident in her control, ready to deliver her ultimatum. I called her directly, appealing to her greed. I said, my voice calm. The mention of Ethan was manipulative. Sarah agreed instantly. She was too focused on the large settlement she believed she was about to secure. She viewed me as the elderly, wealthy father-in-law who would finally pressure Michael into submission. She had no idea she was walking straight into the most carefully constructed forensic trap of her life. The stage was set for the biggest confession and the most devastating betrayal any of them would ever experience. The next afternoon, the tension in my large, quiet study was suffocating. I had carefully arranged the room. The polished mahogany table was starkly empty, save for a single, heavy leather portfolio, my evidence kit, and 3 glasses of water. Michael arrived first. He was visibly anxious, pacing, his hope mixed with dread. He believed I was going to use some legal loophole or old contact to discredit Sarah's blackmail attempt. But he had no idea of the magnitude of the truth I was about to unleash. "Dad, what are those documents you mentioned? Is this going to work?" he asked, his voice low and ragged. "It will work, Michael," I replied, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. "But it's going to be a shock. You need to brace yourself. Everything you think you know about the last 3 years and the last 35 is based on a lie." He looked confused, but before he could press me, the doorbell rang. Sarah walked in, radiating a false, brittle confidence, with Ethan, now 15, trailing silently behind her. Ethan looked miserable, clearly sensing the hostility in the room. His presence was crucial. He needed to witness the destruction of his mother's control, and eventually, the restoration of his bond with his father. Sarah settled into a chair, her eyes immediately fixed on the portfolio. She assumed it contained the check or the agreement. She began, her tone patronizing. Michael shot her a look of pure loathing. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a cold glint of malice showing. She was so utterly convinced of her power. She believed the only thing Michael could do was pay her silence. She was confident because she held what she believed was the ultimate weapon, the 22 of the original negative paternity test, a truth she had not only embraced, but actively used to devastate Michael. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table, fixing my gaze on Sarah. I picked up the portfolio, its weight significant, containing not just papers, but 35 years of suppressed guilt. The air was thick with expectation. Michael was gripping the arms of his chair, oblivious. Sarah merely looked impatient, waiting for me to pressure Michael. She was ready to deliver her final, crushing ultimatum. She had no idea that I was about to hand her an entirely different, fatal kind of defeat. I opened the leather portfolio slowly, The sound of the clasp clicking echoed loudly in the tense silence of the study. I didn't reach for the devastating DNA reports yet. My first move was to execute the tactical takedown of Sarah's current blackmail attempt, showing Michael how ruthlessly she was operating. I pulled out a series of printed emails and bank statements. "Sarah," I began, my voice clear and measured, like a prosecutor presenting undisputed evidence. "Let's first address your recent communication. You are demanding a six-figure sum from Michael, threatening to release fabricated documents about financial misconduct to his professional board. We both know this is a lie. This is extortion." Sarah scoffed, her mask of composure slipping slightly. "That's slander, Charles. Those claims are real, and I need that money to secure Ethan's future now that Michael has abandoned us." "Abandoned you?" I countered, my eyes burning into hers. "You abandoned him and weaponized the truth of his presumed non-paternity. But let's look at your future security." I slid a document across the table. It was a recent bank statement detailing a sizable transfer from Sarah's account to an offshore holding account she had established shortly after the divorce. I stated, pointing to the transaction. I presented another document. Michael stared at the bank statements, his jaw clenched, the realization sinking in that Sarah was actively, ruthlessly trying to ruin his career and bleed him dry. Ethan, who had been trying to remain invisible, looked confused and deeply uneasy. I paused, letting the exposure of her greed hang in the air. Sarah was cornered, her face pale with poorly concealed panic. She quickly tried to pivot, grasping for her only perceived advantage. She was confident. She was relying entirely on that the child wasn't his. This was the moment. She had just used the lie I created one last time. Her overconfidence was about to be her total downfall. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last 3 decades lift, replaced by a surge of terrifying, righteous purpose. "You are absolutely correct, Sarah," I said, leaning back. "The DNA test is the core of this entire nightmare. But you are wrong about one thing. You didn't leave Michael because he wasn't Ethan's father. You left him because you wanted to monetize the fact that he believed he wasn't. And that belief, Sarah, was planted by me. It's time for the real evidence." I reached into the portfolio and pulled out 3 distinct envelopes. The silence was absolute. Even Ethan seemed to stop breathing. Michael looked at me, a desperate, confused plea in his eyes, searching for an explanation that wasn't there yet. Sarah, rigid with contempt, just waited for me to yield. I began, my voice thick with 35 years of suppressed guilt. I paused, letting the statement hang. Sarah's expression went from contemptuous certainty to utter bewilderment. Michael didn't react. The cognitive dissonance was too great. "Here is the original untainted lab report and the archived sample notes," I said, placing the first 2 envelopes down. They were officially stamped, bearing my signature and the dating protocol. "This is the truth I concealed." I then picked up the 3rd envelope, a document printed on the same paper Michael had relied on for 3 decades. "But this," I stated, my gaze locking onto Michael, "is the result I gave you. The result that says, exclusion of paternity. I fabricated it. I swapped the control samples in the lab to generate a negative reading. I did it because I was afraid of a scandal. I was afraid of the shame of your initial doubt. I was selfishly obsessed with protecting the appearance of our family honor." The sound Michael made was not a shout. It was a choked, agonizing gasp. A man hit by the reality that the foundation of his entire adult life was a carefully constructed lie perpetrated by the man he trusted most. Sarah, however, reacted with pure, frantic fury, her plan collapsing around her. "You're lying. You're making this up to protect him. That's professional fraud." "It is," I admitted calmly. "I documented the process in this affidavit, which I will file with the court. I am sacrificing my own professional standing to undo this injustice. I pushed the third document, the sworn affidavit detailing my misconduct, toward her. Your leverage, Sarah, was always based on the belief that Michael wasn't the father. But he is. And the minute you screamed that lie at him 3 years ago, knowing he had my fake proof, you didn't just break his heart. You committed an act of malicious manipulation to secure a favorable divorce and subsequent financial gain. The true, devastating realization of my confession had a double-edged effect. For Michael, the agony of betrayal was immense, but it was instantly tempered by the truth. Ethan is his son. The father he had been raising was biologically his. The light came back into his eyes, mixed with tears of rage and overwhelming relief. For Sarah, her entire scheme evaporated. Her current blackmail attempt was now discredited by the exposure of her character and greed, and her initial claim of non-paternity, her single greatest weapon, was proven to be based on an intentional lie she continued to use, even after knowing Michael was convinced by my fake test. She had manipulated a father using his own self-doubt. She had nothing left. She launched into a torrent of abuse, screaming about my professional ruin, but her words were empty. I looked at Ethan, who was watching this whole disaster unfold with wide, horrified eyes. Ethan, I said gently, your father, Michael, is your true, biological father. I know this is a terrible way to learn this truth, but he never stopped loving you. He never left you. The fight was over. Sarah, realizing she had walked into a trap, grabbed her purse and stormed out, leaving Ethan behind. The revenge was complete. Sarah's manipulation was exposed, and Michael had his son back, even if he had lost his trust in me forever. Sarah's dramatic exit, fueled by pure impotent rage, marked the end of her power. She had come prepared to extort money and left with nothing but the chilling exposure of her malice and the utter loss of her leverage. But the immediate aftermath with Michael was, predictably, a hurricane. The moment Sarah was gone, Michael didn't look at the documents. He looked at me. His relief that Ethan was his was palpable, a wave of joy mixed with a terrifying, absolute fury directed solely at me. His condemnation was deserved. I didn't defend myself. I simply presented the legal path forward. I immediately had the original, authentic lab report and my signed affidavit detailing the forgery submitted to the family court. My confession of professional misconduct was the anchor of Michael's new case. It legally invalidated the original evidence and established the true biological facts. The court process was quick and decisive. The original divorce settlement was deemed voidable due to the fraudulent evidence, my fake test, and Sarah's subsequent malicious manipulation of Michael's belief in that fraud. Sarah's recent extortion attempt only cemented her image as unfit. Michael was immediately granted shared custody, which quickly moved toward full custody, as Sarah, faced with the potential legal fallout from my exposé, retreated entirely. She lost everything, not because I was vengeful, but because she pushed too far, relying on a lie I had given her. My life changed dramatically. I faced a review board for my professional license, which I relinquished without a fight. The media attention was brief but intense. I paid the price for my past arrogance. But the greatest reward was the rebuilding of my relationship with Michael and Ethan. Michael and I had to start over. It took months of difficult, brutally honest conversations. He will never fully trust me again, and I accept that. But he understands the fear and flawed, misplaced paternal protection that drove my initial crime. Now, he has Ethan back, fully and legally his. Ethan, though shocked, was relieved. The knowledge that the man who raised him was his biological father, combined with the clear evidence of his mother's manipulation, helped heal his emotional wounds. Today, 3 years after the truth bomb, I live a different, much lighter life. I spend time with Michael and Ethan, helping Ethan with his college applications. Michael has fully recovered, rebuilt his career, and is a thriving, present father. My long, dark secret is finally out. I faced my consequence, and in doing so, I gave my son his life back. That is the only true redemption I could ever hope for. I often wonder, standing on the other side of this catastrophic choice, whether I did the right thing waiting 3 years, or whether I should have confessed the day Michael first told me about the divorce. The suffering I caused him was immense. What do you think? Given the circumstances, the risk to my reputation, and Michael's emotional state, did I handle the final reveal correctly, or would you have confessed much sooner? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to hear more mind-bending true stories of betrayal and revenge, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any uploads, and tell me your thoughts below. The end. Thank you for listening.